Hi, Beck.
Hi there.
Wanted to say thank you for joining us. Our Body for Life Society members are going to be stoked to meet you. I just want to do a little intro to Beck. I've actually only known Beck for 12 months, but it feels like years. I think Beck is one of the most inspirational women that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. And that is because Beck, to give you context, Beck's a mum of three. She runs two businesses, and yet she's so in tune with herself, her health, and she's fairly recently decided to go a step further, and she is completing her training, her Cert 4 in remedial yoga teaching. And Beck prioritizes not just movement, but the power of breath. And so, welcome.
Thank you.
We want to learn how the heck you do it all. That's what I said to Beck earlier. I said, the one message I want to convey is, how do we do it? How do we live a full life that aligns with who we are, what we're doing? And you seem to wear so many different hats, but yet you nail them all, whether it's mothering, wife, business coach, yoga teacher, yoga student. So first up, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to go a step further with your study.
Sure. First of all, I don't do it all. I do all that is important to me. And I think that is really what I've been figuring out for the last decade. And, you know, when I was younger, I was like, oh, I shouldn't want to do so many things. But actually, in having the children and in having the businesses and building them for ourselves and building them for other people, I realized that that is my fuel. That is my fuel for life. And all of those pieces actually come together a bit like a nice little puzzle and help me to be the best version of myself. So, Liv, I think you asked me, how did I come to do teacher training?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually discovered this type of yoga. Sometimes it's called Japanese therapy yoga, but essentially the important thing to know is that it's a therapeutic style of yoga. So it's designed to achieve a change in the body. I dabbled a little in yoga when I was a younger lass. And before I had the children, but it wasn't something, it was kind of just at the gym type yoga, and I dabbled and I played, and it was kind of fun, and I discovered some interesting insights, but not that much. But this is a little bit of a health and wellness discussion, so I hope I can use body part names.
Of course.
But really for me, the yoga teacher training started kind of about 9.5 years ago, even though I started the course just at the start of the year, and it'll run for the year. And at that stage, I had just had my first baby, and I went into this clinic just around the corner from my parents-in-law, and we picked it because it was close and they could take the bub for an hour, and she was 8 weeks old, and my husband wanted to be supportive of my recovery after having a baby, and we've walked in and we've gone to this beautiful lady, and her name's Lynn, and we're signing in, you know, the typical form of first time practice, and she's like, oh, you've just had a baby, great, how long ago? I'm like, 8 weeks, and she's like, oh, wow, congratulations. And did you do yoga during your pregnancy? No, I did some upper aerobics and different things, but I basically worked too much and, you know, all these different things, and having a bit of a giggle. And she's like, right. She said, okay, we don't normally let people in until about 12 weeks, but I can see that it's taken you a lot to get here today. You look like a very committed person. So if you make me one promise, if all you do today is lay down on the ground and focus on squeezing your anus and breathing, you may stay. And pretty much 10 years later, I'm still working out to remember to squeeze my anus and how to breathe. So interestingly, you know, we take our first breaths when we're children, and then along the way, conditioning happens. And for me, I have had troubles in recent years. I actually hold my breath. I get very excited, and for all different reasons to do with my physiology and the way my body functions, I held my breath for periods of years without even realizing it. Was completely subconscious. And this yoga had completely changed my life. It's very, very clever, and I always thought it was very clever. And I decided that I wanted to learn more about the back end of it. I'd wanted to, not literally, I wanted to learn more about what sat behind it. So that was how I started the teacher training. I'd wanted to start it so many times, but I just didn't have the availability. And this course basically runs for a year. It's 3.5 hours. I'm at a stage where my children are sleeping and I'm sleeping and I'm healthy enough to bring this kind of stimulus in. And it's just blown me away. And yeah, I love it.
Why? So help us understand from a health perspective, because we often talk in Body Launch and Body for Life Society about how when the nervous system is switched on, we flick into that fight and flight stage, which causes an increase in stress hormones and cortisol. And it's so interesting, you know, a really great lifestyle strategy that we so often forget is one of the best ways to reduce insulin is to reduce cortisol, and breathing can do that. So if you had to identify, you know, the top 3 ways we can breathe, I mean, there's squeezing the anus, I'm guessing has to do with pelvic floor control. Is that right?
It's mainly in a postpartum body that there's a lot of stitching that's to come back together, and it's try to emphasize on they're looking for your system to lift itself back up because you've wanted to drop it all down. So that's what it is, and it's a big, powerful muscle. So that was as simple as it was at the time.
Okay, so what would be your top few tips for creating, which sounds weird, doesn't it, to create stillness and find your breath amongst the chaos and the busy lifestyles that we all have? How do we do it?
Okay, so the first thing I would say is that these different activities that I've chosen, I call it a bit like recipe development. So everything I do is a bit like recipe development, and I'll work on a recipe for a period, and I mean like a lifestyle recipe, but you can think about it as a cooking recipe. I think about what am I trying to achieve and how do I make the pieces all work together. And what I've found, I have a long, beautiful history, as do most people with their stories. And I got to work on the Sydney Olympics. I got to work after that at the Australian Institute of Sport. And I got to understand about performance. And what I got to understand about human performance at the Institute of Sport was how much they focus on recovery. And recovery helps you when it's time to train, when it's time to compete. So whether that's a sporting situation, whether that is being able to get kids to school and you need to make a million lunches, it feels like, and you want to make sure everything's sorted for the day, or you're in ISO and you've got a workshop happening, whatever it is, whatever your version of performance is. What I've found that I didn't have for the first nearly 30 years of my life, in my own embodiment. I knew this stuff in theory, but I wasn't doing it. But the first thing is it creates space. So space is the biggest economy I trade in, and I'm all about enabling genius in others. And for that to come out, you need space. And space is not the same as time. So, but what I find is, so space, what I mean by space is that when you're really effective, it feels like time disappears. That's what I mean by creating space. And so what I find is that movement, health, wellness, breathing, anything that focuses on how I function, how I can show up, how I can enable my own genius is what enhances my everyday. And I've realized how it can feel to feel well and healthy. And am I perfect every day? Nope, never have been. I used to think it was possible, and then I realized, I'm a recovering perfectionist. But what I did realize was that prior preparation does predict performance. And so what I do is my top tips in how I do integrate breathing is that, first of all, I need to make it a priority. So I'd like to work with structure and flexibility, which I also like about the nervous system, because the nervous system does give you flexibility and an ability to respond. And then you've also got the housing of the nervous system. You've got that beautiful spine that provides structure. So otherwise, if we just had lots of flexibility and we had no structure, we'd be a puddle on the ground. And if we just had a structure with nothing flowing through us, well, we're completely useless. So I like to look at both, and I look at that in all aspects of what I do in life. So my first tip would be to make space. And structurally, you need to work out what are all the components that you want, all of them. And I do it with, typically Post-it notes or little cards. Oh, you can see. Okay, you can see
Yeah,
on
we
my
can.
board behind me, you know. I'm always mapping something out. So whatever it is, it doesn't need to be fancy. It can be a scrap of paper. But if you write down all of the things you want to have in your week and then how long each of them takes, you have to work out what your most important are. And that's the all. And then how do you fit all those together? I don't typically do it by myself. Hubby and I tend to do it together because we've got to layer it together. We've got the two of us, we've got the two businesses, we've got the three children, we've got schools, you know, the whole lot. And we have really big dreams. And those dreams are for big impact. And that's where we're at. So we used to have to do this activity really regularly, where we would sit down and go, okay, what are all the pieces? And, you know, it's a bit like trading. It's like, okay, right. So, and it can feel a bit like that. That structure can feel uncomfortable when you're starting. It's like, okay, so you want to train half the week. I want to train half the week. That means we've got this many mornings. It's really boring, right, Liv? Structure can be really, really boring, but it's really, really important, and it gives you the freedom and flexibility that you're after. So the first one is make space for what's important to you. It doesn't have to be important forever. It's what's important for now. I recommend focusing on a 100-day period to test your recipe. And so kind of what I work out is, what do I want to do on a weekly basis? How do we fit all those modules in? Who are all the stakeholders, the different people we need to communicate with to make that happen? Any resources that we need? Do we need to do any preparation? How do we make the whole flow work? But the trick then is that you'll find you've got these time blocks. So it's like, okay, I've got a block here and I've got a block there. But the situation is now you need to take your structure and use it for flexibility. And I remember this coming into whether it's a time block, that the benefit is if you've planned it out and you don't do it right then, it doesn't matter, because you've got the whole block and you can find somewhere to move it. But if you never defined it and you never said, I want to do this thing and this is what it is and where I'm going to move it to, it just won't happen. It'll evaporate. So if you want to say, I'm going to do 3 movement sessions a week, I know mornings are good for me, test it. Recipe test. Lunchtimes are good for me. I've changed my training in the last few months while we've been working through the changing environment, and I do it about every 3 months. I used to have to do it every 6 weeks, but now that I'm in the rhythm. So first one I would say is time blocking and making space. Is that helpful?
Yes, very. And so when you do that, so I'm trying to understand the implementation side of things. You put in the diary movement or breathing exercises and meditation or journaling or meal planning, right? Like this is time blocking where it's really specific.
Yes, I do it across all aspects of my life, and it is extremely specific. I find one of the hardest parts to starting anything new in recipe development mode and lifestyle recipe development mode is working out how to get what is the size of the component. So I have done Vedic meditation training, so 20 minutes twice a day type breathing. You taught me the beautiful pranayama breathing, which I use on a whenever I need it kind of basis, to get me back into myself and to get everything kind of really talking to each other. My brain working. And I use breath all the time. Yeah, I really program it in, Liv, is the answer. And just in that, like when you want to integrate fennel into your life and you want a recipe for fennel because you heard it was really good and you're like, where the hell do I start? Same thing with movement. So I find structure of often work out what logistics can work for you. Do you need to go out to make it happen? I often do. Or can you do it at home? And so you might need to go and find a class that works for you. What's the location? And is it better to just try the class? Try it out. Try new things. You don't have to do it forever, but just try new things. So structure and flexibility work together. But yes, I'm very detailed in, I'm a big sharer. Hence the detail in my answers. I love to share the love, but it is that structure and is a really key component, and I learn things. The next thing I would say is once you've worked out what your structure is, you need to be able to respond to environmental factors, and that would be my second tip. First, and that second tip is really that your mind is going to talk to you when you want to breathe, when you want to move. You've been conditioning yourself for however many years. And if you look at the statistics on how long it takes to repair faulty conditioning, it's a long time. And there's that changing of habits, that unlearning, that relearning, and the reconditioning that we need to go through. So
yes! That is just, and our body launchers know that in that moment of stress or fatigue, or you just feel blah, it's so easy to convince yourself just one glass of wine, or just a few dips and bickies, and you're so right. You actually just need to recondition yourself, which essentially is talking to yourself, and it's saying, girl, you've got this. You do not need that. That is the old default behavior. I love that.
Totally. And I guess for me, my take on it would be just go and do it, even if you don't feel like it. And what happens is you'll actually find, so 6 a.m. yoga is a classic example, and I'll give you a bit more detail in a second on that, because eventually you stop saying to yourself, should I go? Should I get out of bed? Eventually you stop, but you have to keep going. So you need to be persistent. You need to be patient. But the caveat I would give is just go and be kind. Now, what I mean by that is I judge everything I do based on my ability to be present in any given situation. Presence is my currency. So I can use my structure so that I'm able to be completely present in whatever it is that I'm doing. That's my goal. However, I also can hold very high standards for myself, and that has been very interesting conditioning that motherhood has taught me so much about that I could never have imagined. But what I mean by just go and be kind is sometimes you actually just need to go and breathe. And if you really haven't slept and you did everything the day before to help yourself to have a great renewing night of sleep, then maybe sometimes you don't go. So I guess what I'm saying is I sometimes move that module. So my yoga teacher training is on Monday nights, Liv, as an example, and it was supposed to run till 9. I thought it was 9 o'clock. It actually runs till 9:30. And so for me, I've got to get to Gladesville, about a 45-minute drive to get to the training studio. And I get home a bit late because I'm an early riser these days. And yeah, I just was training then I was doing resistance training, which has got a completely different breathing pattern. On Tuesday mornings, it was too much. So I was not able to go and train. So instead, I do what you said, which is I do my own breathing exercises at home. Hubby does Tuesday mornings in the gym, and I go at lunchtime as I did today. The other thing I would say is when you go and be kind, sometimes it's not about pushing through, but I will always go, even if it's just to breathe. And I let my ego go quite a long time ago in this journey, which is partly why I chose yoga teacher training, and partly what it taught me was to stop judging how much time I had, what I was doing, and what I should, the shoulding on yourself. So being kind sometimes means, and today was a perfect example, Liv. Today I had my resistance training at lunchtime, and we've just bought a new car. We sold ours last weekend. So I go to the gym and I've completely forgotten that I don't have a car. So it's a 45-minute resistance session, and I've got two choices. Do I walk or Uber? Uber's going to take too long. I might as well just walk and arrive to the class 15 minutes late. Or do I not go at all? And I went. I breathed. I did my breathing all the way up. I listened to an audiobook on the way up. I got to have beautiful sunshine. I had a smoothie on the way, bit of a prep. So I had some nice glucose available, all that kind of sciencey stuff I've learned along the way. But that's how I get all the components to work together. And it gives me space, clarity, and the ability to perform for the rest of the afternoon. And I judge it on a day-by-day basis.
And you prioritized it, right? Because in that moment, you could have done the easy default option of, oh, I'll just miss training for the day. But you didn't. You talked to yourself and you went.
Yeah, and I think that's partly also, Liv, what the yoga actually taught me was that there's not just one way to move, and yoga won't be for everyone. Chinese medicine, Japanese medicine, Oriental therapies, it won't be for everyone, but work out your own recipes and be willing to change them if they're not working for you anymore. And that's where being kind in your movement and kind to yourself in your breath, you're not here to punish yourself. And if it feels like a punish, guess what? You'll stop doing it.
Yes. And that's so true. I remember after I gave birth to, I think it was Zara, I and some girlfriends were like, let's do a spin class. And I don't like spin classes. And I'm sitting in the spin class and I turned to one of my friends and I said, I'm never doing this again. This has been 45 minutes of hell when I could have moved my body in a way that felt way more pleasant. And I kid you not, to this day, years later, I have not and will not ever walk into a spin class because it was not serving me. It's not, for me, that is not a moment of kindness and of love and of cherishing my body. It was pure punishment. And I feel like life's too short to do things like that aren't serving you.
100%. 100%. I think that, and I think the other thing is if you do things that don't serve you, they steal your fuel. So I talk about in every situation, in all contexts of life, business, health, life architecture, I talk about having the smarts, the mindset, and the fuel, and working out your recipe for those. So everyone's coming to you for the smarts, be it the background knowledge, they're coming to you for all of the information that they need, they're working with you on their mindset, and they're working with you on their fuel. For how do they fuel themselves to show up in each of those contexts? How do they work on their mindset to break through the challenges they have? How do they have the smarts? There's all of those elements and they fuel each other. And if you're doing something that is stealing your energy and it is stealing your fuel, be it in nutrition, be it in movement, be it in all these be it in your gut bugs, be it in that you've got bad habits, that you're not having enough water, you're not making enough time, all these different things. There's so many layers. And health education, it's very hard to be your own expert because we weren't ever taught it. And so I have built my own village of people who can help me. Some of them know me, some of them don't know me. Some of them we're friends on Instagram. I turn off anybody that doesn't help me on social media. Some I pay for service. All different types of relationships, but all the village that really help. That applies to breath, to yoga, and to movement is when you're looking at your, relates to the first piece on making space and time blocking, is transitions. So when you've got lots of different pieces going on, the transitions are incredibly important. Experience. You've just been in this amazing session at work. It's been really intellectually stimulating. You're really feeling awesome. And then you've got to quickly shift and you've got to do something else without any transition time, no buffer time. It feels like you are hitting a brick wall. And I found this initially, so I needed to shift parts of the recipe. And so, for example, when I finish a workshop, I allow myself a decompression time. For me, is what I need. Because otherwise, if I walk into mum mode, I walk in like, oh, hang on, I was this intellectually stimulated person and now we're talking about...
You cooked dinner the wrong way.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'm hungry. It's like, okay, here we go. And, you know, all of the parts of life, you know, the good, the bad. But I find if you're ready, you've taken the, and it can be as simple as doing the pranayama breathing, and so that you can transition. And the funny thing I found was, with my yoga, it's actually as much about the transit times to have that space as it is about the movement. So be mindful of why you're moving. It could actually just be to breathe in the car. It could be to sing loudly to music, which also gets your oxygen, and be really creative. You know, if you love dancing, dance. Breathe that way. If you like meditation apps and guided meditation apps and that draws your attention to breathing, whatever works for you. Honestly, just find things and work on your recipe development. And having said that, don't try and overcomplicate your curry. So I made a dal last night, and it was a recipe I was going to add in other flavors, and it was just calling for cinnamon and turmeric. I'm like, that's not really enough for me. And I love to cook, and I'm quite a talented, it's one of my talents. It's a way I share love, and I didn't need it. So what I mean by that is, once you've looked at your whole menu, choose which movement options and breathing options you're going to go with, test them out for a while, see how they work for you, and then re-choose rather than constantly choosing. So that's, again, that structure. And that allows you to go through, what are the different components? How am I going to integrate them? And then after 100 days, which does sound like a long time sometimes, you've started off with your education, you're getting your habits in place, and then you just got to keep going. And it's on a day by day, half day by day, whatever kind of time frame. The momentum is much easier to keep a car going once it's started than it is to keep stopping and starting. So they'd be my 3 key tips.
Yes, that is such a good analogy. You're so right. It's I know for me too, when I'm running, when I'm in that zone, the idea of stopping, like whether it's to let someone go past me or stopping at a light, it actually makes me angry because it stops the flow. And like you said, it's much harder to get going again when you're like, I can just walk the rest.
Yeah. And like, you're a runner, Liv. So you notice that, right? Like when you're running along, and the momentum and how the body feels when it's in flow, when it's got that motion. And then you have to stop and jog on the spot because you've got to run across the road and there's a car, and then you're running around a dog and you're changing the footpath. That's kind of like life. So we want to build up that health, and that prior preparation predicts performance. We want to build up that resilience in our system so that we don't injure ourselves when we have to run on grass instead of, that kind of thing. But also it hurts a bit. When you actually stop and stand, you actually can be standing in your pain, and that diverts your attention. Now, I'm not saying to avoid those things. I'm just talking about the power of momentum. And, water is the most beautiful example, because we get it into our system and it just helps things to flow. And then it can slowly peter away. You and I have done some work on that, particularly on some of your challenges. And it always amazes me when it brings the focus back. So when we've got structure, it keeps bringing the focus back, bringing the focus back, bringing the focus back. So that's, all those beautiful little analogies. And that's why I love to work across business, health and life, because it's about how they all integrate together. And for me, if you work on one without working on the others, ultimately, I don't mean you need to bite it all off now, but they all affect each other. So you actually can't compartmentalize. And I think, interestingly, why I chose this yoga teacher training was I went for a mechanistic reason. I didn't know anything about holistic health. I didn't know anything about natural health. I'd learned about sport performance from a very traditional model at the Institute of Sport. That was my exposure. I was no good at science at school. I didn't understand. All I was interested in was the performance of humans, but not at that body kind of level. And it really taught me a lot about myself, not to judge myself. It taught me yoga's not about the shapes. It's just about, where are you at? Where am I at? Today I can do this. 10 years on, I can do some moves much better. Others, I do them worse. And it's that beautiful journey of, here's where I am at today. It gives me that moment to go, I'm okay. Work on these shoulders coming down a bit, and it fuels everything. Everything relates to each other, and you get to choose your recipe and what are the components for you, and what's your role, what matters to you today, what fuels you today. That's what matters.
I love it. So just to recap, as you said, it's all about structure and flexibility. And then your 3 hot tips is, the first one is make space for health and wellness and breath. And then from an implementation point of view, it's about time blocking, right? Like the great example you used where you were meant to exercise at lunch, and even though your car wasn't there, you were like, I don't care, I'm going to walk to my class. The second one was one that you spoke about, which I think is so powerful. It was unlearning and then reconditioning. So in those moments where we want to slip into, and we naturally on a subconscious level can slip into default mode and old habits, we're actually talking to ourselves, right? And we're creating new habits. And the third one you said was the transition time. And like you said, that buffer period. So I think when you're wearing all those different hats and you're managing a lot, which we all are, you know, so many of us are time poor and we have a lot on our plate. And I know the word busy is overused and I don't want to use it much, but a lot of us do have busy lifestyles. And so I think you're right. I think whether it's making a cup of tea, doing a few deep breaths in the car, like you said, doing alternate nostril breathing, just figuring out one quick short way to go, that part of the day's over and now I'm moving into the next stage.
100%.
Awesome. Thank you, Beck. That is so useful. And thank you, because I feel like it's really practical. Like we can grab hold of each of these strategies and you definitely put them in a new light. We've covered them in some of the content when we discuss mindset, because weight loss and weight management definitely requires the reconditioning, but you've given us more structure and flexibility around how to do that.
Fantastic.
So thank you. I'm going to include some details for Beck so that you guys can stay connected and see how she lives her life and integrates all of these different concepts and strategies into her everyday. So I'm going to include that in the video, if that's okay.
Fantastic. And if people do have questions, please reach out. I'm very, very happy to answer them. You'll catch me in my DMs on Instagram. You'll probably get some info on my website, I imagine, Liv. So please reach out if you have questions and I can send you towards the Yoga Houses clinic, because it is a unique style of yoga. But yeah, go explore, breathe. Remember that those ribs are supposed to move, and breathe, and yeah, have fun with it and enjoy the ride.
Thank you. I'm sitting up taller already. Bye.
Bye.